Usually we've got our Clippy-on microphone. I've not done it with this before. So I don't know if I'm going to hold it. I'm going to put it in the stand. But at a dramatic moment, I will take it out of the stand, like a boy band. Mustang Sally. That's it. I'm going to do it like this. Okay, well, today we're going to talk about prayer again, and that was a really wonderful time of worship. Thank you, Mark and Rachel, for that this morning, and a brilliant time to have an opportunity to pray for each other before we go into hearing what I have to say today. So what I'm going to be talking on is just being, and just being in order that we can taste and see the goodness of God. So we're continuing our series, Journeying into Prayer. In recent weeks, we've begun looking at the Lord's Prayer with Mark, and Anthony has spoken to us about calling on God in critical moments, which was a topic slightly adjacent to the topic of prayer. It ran along a slightly different track, but it was close enough to the prayer track that you could hop between the carriages. And I'm doing a similar thing today, and talking about sitting at the feet of Jesus. Just be. I'm reading from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42, where we read about two sisters who love Jesus, Martha and Mary. So Luke 10, verses 38 to 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So let's have a little look at Martha within this story. Martha is doing a beautiful thing. She has opened up her home. I can't see the bottom of my page. She has opened up her home, giving her time and energy to being hospitable and welcoming. It's worth noting that Jesus does not rebuke her about being a busy host. He doesn't rebuke her for preparing food and for looking after her guests. That is not the problem here. We see many times through the Gospels that Jesus encourages and benefits from the kind of generosity and hospitality we see Martha giving here. He loves a bustling home. The problem that he points out is that she is worried and upset. She's distracted. The original word used for worried has the meaning of being pulled or dragged in different directions. Martha, therefore, has no room to give gracious care to her guest, which is the most important part of hospitality. In verses 41 and 42 of Luke 10, Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one." Other interpretations say, "One thing is necessary," or "Only one thing is important." I have often read this as a stern rebuke. However, having looked more prayerfully and seeing it through the lens of my years of experiencing how Jesus speaks to me, I think it can be seen as Jesus giving Martha an invitation, permission to slow down and rest. It's a perspective-giving kindness rather than a harsh, corrective word. He's inviting her to leave the busyness and receive the gracious presence of Jesus, to listen to him and know that she is valued not for what she does or how well she does it, but simply for who she is as a child of God. I relate to Martha. I relate to that busy, flustered, lots on my to-do list, nobody's helping me sort of feeling. I suspect lots of us do. Doing things actually full of resentment and impatience, feeling snappy, self-important and agitated. A verse that speaks directly to this, that I say to myself often, is Luke 12, verse 25. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Other Bible versions translate worrying as being anxious, fussing, and taking pains. If all of our activity leaves us with no time to just be, we're likely to be worried and troubled. We're likely to become resentful of others, as we saw Martha was towards Mary. She says, "My sister has left me to do all the work myself." I'd love to have been there to actually hear the tone of this, because I imagine it wasn't very pleasant. and then, so we can become resentful of others, and we can also snappily demand justice and fairness, as we saw Martha do of Jesus. She says, "Tell her to help me." The cheek. Life is sustained only by inhaling and exhaling. It is essential and vital. We take in, then we give out. We can abandon our need for control, for fairness. We can stand defiant against fuss, resentment, self-importance, feeling like we have to hold it all together, because we have a loving Father who is able, willing, and waiting for us to cast our worries, anxiety, and fussing onto him. Not just that, but he gives us peace in return. Philippians 4, verse 6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and make your minds in Christ Jesus." So that's Martha. And she provides the contrast that allows Jesus to draw attention to Mary's position of still, quiet, tasting, seeing, and just being. Martha acted like Jesus needed her. By contrast, Mary acted like she needed Jesus. We read in verse 42 that Mary has chosen what is better. Other versions say she has chosen the good portion or the good part, the right thing. The two sisters embody the distinction between legalism and love. Legalism is self-important, it's checking everyone else is pulling their weight and that your weight pulling is being noticed. It's self-fueled and therefore totally exhausting. Those who unwaveringly look up to the face of Jesus do not give a care to what onlookers might think. An unwavering love of Jesus does not measure, compete, compare, or look begrudgingly. It is God-reliant and life-giving. The Lord does not need our work. He wants our love. When Jesus was asked which is the greatest commandment, he responds in Matthew 22, verses 37 to 39. To love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. That is the one thing needed, the better thing. Single-minded love of Jesus does not mean that we cannot serve others. It doesn't mean that we sit about without the time to do anything else because we're being still and we're at his feet. It doesn't prevent us from having lives that are filled with activity. Rather, it empowers it. Colossians 3 verse 23 to 24 reads, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving." So we love him first, and his love empowers us to love others. Without this single-minded love, we are simply noisy gongs and clashing cymbals, just a load of sound and ferocity aimlessly bumping around, representing and demonstrating nothing. In stark contrast, wondrous things are birthed from a life spent loving Jesus. We have many examples of that in this room. We have a wonderful example in Nadia, who poured her heart out to us this morning, seeking our support and our prayer as she goes out into a world loving and looking after people for her living. It's a wonderful and beautiful thing, a calling that comes from sitting at the feet of Jesus and looking upon his will for your life. We have wonderful examples like Matt and Rachel. I know, I'm sorry, Rachel, you're going to hate me. But they're sitting and looking at the feet of Jesus has resulted in them extending their home and adopting two beautiful children who now are embraced into the kingdom family. We have examples like Matt Foster, who has started and begun a charity which is like, people use it literally too much, but it's literally changing the lives of young people who are vulnerable and in need of the love of God and the security that he brings. We have the life of Anthony and Jill, which doesn't really need any explanation, but they have most clearly sat at the feet of Jesus, and they have done the smallest things that they've heard him do, that they've heard him lead them to, and they have done the biggest things that they've heard him lead them to, and it's all been for the lifting up of others. And to speak personally, Mark and I are very much in a position of sitting at the feet of Jesus and looking to him for what our next steps are. That's always how we've lived our life. Every big life decision that we've made has come from that position. And our most recent big life position was to sit at the feet of Jesus and hear him telling Mark that everything up to this point has led him towards a fatherly love for this church. And we have acted on that. But from that position of being seated at his feet and asking him where he wants us to go, we've laid ourselves down in order to lift you up. And our hearts and love for you are immense. None of these things can be planned. They can't be rotated in. They can't be busied into fruition. It is born at the feet of Jesus and fed by the love in his eyes. Now, I have a little phrase. It's been a challenging one to me. I heard it in a podcast I was listening to while I was being busy. The phrase is, insight is not change. And I thought, ooh. And I wrote it down, and I've been thinking about it loads ever since. I really love it. I love it as a phrase, but I do find it very cutting. I do a lot of reading, I listen to lots of podcasts, I listen to the preachers at church, and it gives me lots of insight. But do I take it on? Do I intentionally act on and actively remember what I learn of God and his wonderful ways? Do I apply myself to knowing, to allowing God to change me? Our new series on prayer will be continuing for a while, especially because we've had 2 weeks and Mark's covered about 2 words, I think. So we can listen to these talks. We can become experts on biblical references to prayer. We can read the best books, gaining insight all the time. But insight is not change. If you want to see your prayer life change, just make some small decisions that move you towards prayer. Evidence-based neuroscience shows us that the more we choose actions that align with the person we want to become, the easier it becomes with time to make additional choices which support and encourage our goals. So, if you want to experience more of Jesus' love for you and your love for him through prayer, a change could be to just be, even just for a little bit. That might lead then to another decision, maybe a change in environment. You think, I'll go for a walk, I'll find a quiet place, for example. Or a change of habit, like my phone stays in a drawer until this time or until this has happened. You could include Christian music in your day. Sit still, being mindful of his presence as you finish a hot drink. He's always there. You just need to remember he is and let yourself be aware of him. I don't know what would help you to just be, but just be in your own unique and perfect way. Talk about what you do with others as well. We all have so much to learn from each other. Do not become overwhelmed by prayer, by making unrealistic, enormous goals. Just pick something small that you can slot into your day that will have a gateway effect on your behaviour, leading to bigger changes as time goes along. You might not find any of these helpful because they're personal to me, but just in case, here are some of mine. I must emphasise they're not always executed perfectly. I'd love to hear how you set up your environment at home or at work to help you set your face to Jesus. Here are a few of mine. I like to have a Christian book and a Bible to hand next to my spot on the sofa. We all have a spot on the sofa, don't we? Yeah, good. It took me trying a few, but I've found a Bible app that I really like. It has a Bible reading, a devotional, and a reflection each day. I have a favourite playlist or favourite CDs to hand, worship songs. CDs, do you remember those? Our only CDs these days are in the car, but I put the TV remote just slightly out of the way, and that encourages me to just take a moment of quiet before popping the TV on. I remember good times with Jesus, and I talk and hear about our family's favourite parts of the day over dinner, and we as a family try and remind each other to choose gratefulness. All these things lead to prayer or a greater awareness of Jesus' presence amongst us. So this morning, as I draw all of my words to a close, I would like to lead us into a time of just being, of being still, of sitting at the feet of Jesus, choosing what is better, choosing the good portion, the good part, the right thing. A time to, as Psalm 34 verse 8 says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. So DJ Lloyd is going to put on a couple of songs for us. Now, this can be a flexible time. We've got our table of creative things at the back, so if you want to have a mosey round and see